Recently, there was a terrorist attack in Istanbul at the airport in Turkey. Hundreds of people were injured and dozens were killed. The attack has been blamed on the Islamic State. They've also taken credit for this. British counterintelligence forces have also pinned the blame on the Islamic State. When asked about this, I stated, of course, that it's always horrible when there's a horrendous terrorist attack, civilians getting murdered. But there's a saying in the U.S., when you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. Now, of course, the victims in this case at an international airport, they didn't lay down with dogs. But the Turkish government certainly has. The Turkish government has been trading in the illegal oil trades with the Islamic State. They've been supporting these militants in Syria for years. And now suddenly Erdogan wants to talk about terrorism, and he wants to apologize for shooting down a Russian jet which was bombing these terrorist groups in Syria. You look at the timing and you have to think that this is not very genuine. This is disingenuous. An attack on an airport in Turkey is going to have a very detrimental effect on tourism and the tourism industry. Since downing the Russian jet, the Russians have placed restrictions, travel restrictions, on Russian tourists going to Turkey. And that has had a devastating effect to the tourist economy in Turkey. Now, I don't like collective punishment. I don't think you should take it out on the tourist industry and businesses for something the government has done. But this is what was done. And now, suddenly, they want to apologize and say, we're sorry we shut down your jet, shot it down. And the Russians are in talks to reopen the tourist trade to allow travel back to Turkey. Now, of course, the bombing itself, the attack on the airport, is going to reduce tourism globally. And then we find out, after this agreement had already gone through, that the terrorists from the Islamic State who attacked were primarily Chechens. Chechen terrorists. Now, of course, Chechen terrorists have had NATO support for many, many years, and they've been attacking and killing civilians in Russia. So telling, though, that the Russians were willing to overlook and not overlook, but accept the apology of the Turks all of a sudden. It was many months ago that they shot down this jet, which was not threatening the territorial integrity of Turkey. They were clearly attacking the Islamic State and Al-Asham and these other terrorist groups in Syria, as the Russian bombing campaign had been doing. Now Chechen terrorists attack in Turkey, and relations between Russia and Turkey are starting to smooth over a little bit as they have a common enemy. But I don't think this is going to last. Erdogan, who stated he wants the same dictatorial powers as Adolf Hitler, he wants to be the Führer, says what he has to say. But he will continue to support ISIS and these other terrorist groups in Syria, as he has been doing. Moving over, we had another terrorist attack in Bangladesh. If you remember, there was a mosque bombing last December, and now there's been an attack in a cafe where primarily Turks and Japanese were the victims. They were hacked up, cut up by knives or machetes, and held hostage until the security forces combined with military personnel went in and freed at least 12 of the hostages. Many others were killed. And the Prime Minister of Bangladesh is saying they want to stamp out terrorism. And I stated on the news yesterday, that's great. But their methods of fighting terrorists are like hitting ants with a hammer, while they're simultaneously pouring sugar on the floor. If you really want to stop terrorism, stop pouring sugar on the floor. You have to really look at your allies and your own foreign policies, the people you support. If you want to be serious about stopping terrorism, great. You can start with the UN that put brutal sanctions on Iraq that killed over 800,000 Iraqi children, starved them to death. You can look at the Israelis, who have an unapologetic, openly racist apartheid regime. You can look at the American government with its drone strikes, which is nothing but high-tech terrorism. and their State Department and CIA's not so covert support arming and financing and training the rebel groups who are fighting in Syria and who are fighting in Libya. They literally gave guns and ammunition and trucks, particularly the Toyota Hilux, all the equipment and gear they need to Al-Qaeda groups. And the DIA admitted this, that they're fostering a Salafist principality, and the Islamic State did not arise in a vacuum. If it were not for the Zionist neocon-led invasion of Iraq, which was based on fabrications, not mistakes, but intentional deceptions, and you didn't have a generation of men growing up after one war and brutal sanctions under another war and brutal occupation, with Fallujah being leveled, with white phosphorus being dumped on their cities, with torture in Abu Ghraib. If they didn't see this ideology would not attract so many people. You wouldn't have so many people in such desperate economic situations to join a group like Al-Nusra or the Islamic State, which often they just switch hats and it's the same people, or Ara al-Sham, which the U.S. completely backs, even after they go into villages and massacre women and put people up against the wall and shoot them and kill children and cut throats. It is terrorism. But that is the U.S.'s game. It's always been terrorism. When they were backing El Salvadorian death squads, when they were backing the Contras, when they've had multiple coups d'etats throughout Latin America and Africa. That is terrorism. So if you want to stamp out terrorism, let's start with the state-sanctioned terrorism of the United States, of the UK, of France, of Israel, of Saudi Arabia, which stones women to death, which has multiple beheadings for minor crimes. These are acts of terrorism, and you absolutely cannot isolate and focus on how to stop a particular brand of terrorism without changing your own foreign policies that foster these type of events and arm the very rebels you're trying to fight. Turkey was attacked by the same groups it supports. The same groups its government has actively helped economically by illegally buying oil. The same groups that they arm, that they allow to cross the border and safely hide under the umbrella of NATO so that the Syrian army cannot chase after them and finish them off. Turkey and Turkey's government has been helping Al-Qaeda groups. You reap what you sow. If you want to stop terrorism, you have to stop arming and financing terrorist groups. As Vladimir Putin said to the UN, you think you're using them. You think they're primitive. But actually they're using you. That might be the best case scenario, because I don't think it's just a case of them getting used. These are intentional, planned out policies. It's not blowback. These are the intended consequences, not the unintended consequences. They don't know specifically what kind of lashing out is going to happen, but they know it is going to happen, and this has fostered chaos. This is on purpose. This is what the military-industrial complex wants and needs. And they're in Syria as Hillary Clinton's State Department emails, which are so easy to find because she didn't use secure servers, admits the best way to help Israel is to fight and foster these groups to fight Bashar Assad in Syria, because that cuts off the corridor between Iran and Hezbollah. And Israel tried to fight Hezbollah on their own in 2006 after arranging the Hariri assassination, and they lost. They don't know how to fight people who can fire back. They're used to killing kids, throwing rocks, or making homemade rockets. And they just bombed Gaza again yesterday. This is ongoing. We have to cut aid to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, and to Al-Qaeda. Stop arming and financing terrorist groups, or you will continue to have terrorism, and they will bite the hand that feeds them. They are not all in on it. There are plenty of people who sincerely hate the West, And why wouldn't they when we burn and starve their children? Israel is allowing rat-faced baby burners out of jail. They don't care. They have a racial apartheid, and you have all these leftists full of identity politics who are obsessed with race, except when Israel does it. When Israel builds an apartheid wall across the border and annexes territory, that's okay. They don't care. It's all about virtue signaling, and they don't want to tackle anything that is not a safe topic. End all aid to Israel. Stop financing radical fanatics with a religious theme. And if you want to talk about radical Islam, of course it's a problem. And yes, there are versions of that faith that are just varying degrees of bad. As in Christianity and many religions. That's how it's been historically, and that's how it is now. But if you want to really compare, radical Americanism has killed far more people than radical Islam. Millions in Indochina, 1.5 million in Korea, over 1 million Iraqis. This radical Americanism, this American exceptionalism, that is a real threat to world peace. That is what is financing and arming drug cartels in Mexico, giving guns to Al-Qaeda, supporting Jandala, MEK, the Mujahideen, the Contras, the Zionists, the Wahhabis. That's the basis and the root of this problem. Radical American exceptionalism. That's the religion we really have to look at alongside radical Islam. I encourage you to please help ANC continue going. I've made a few thousand videos now. I've also written a few books and made some full-length documentary films. We're doing film screenings. We have podcasts. We're really building this alternative media, and I need your help. You can support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Please click the link below and consider becoming a supporter. There's also a lot of perks that come with that. Thank you.